The shoe is sitting in front of me, and the sticker on the box says $260. CloudMonster 2. Swiss engineered. That's the line On Holding has been selling since 2010, and last year it did $2.3 billion in revenue on that line, with gross margins north of 59%. 59%. Apple's hardware margin is 36%. So before I've even cut anything open, the accounting is telling you something. The cost of goods sold on this shoe is somewhere around $85 to $90 landed, and the retail is $260. The gap is the story. The gap is always the story. And the part nobody wants to say out loud is that the Swiss engineering on this shoe was done in Zurich on a computer, and the shoe itself was assembled in a Feng Tay factory in Vietnam that also makes Nikes, by workers earning roughly $300 a month, using the same EVA foam suppliers that Hoka uses, that Brooks uses, that New Balance uses. The only thing Swiss about this shoe is the logo and the marketing budget. I'm going to cut it open and show you why that matters, and more importantly, why it doesn't matter as much as you think. Because the actually interesting engineering decision on Made is not the one they talk about in their ads. Let me start with the outsole, because this is where the marketing lives. These hollow pods, they call them clouds, the system is CloudTec, are what you're paying the premium for, at least on paper. The original patent was filed by Olivier Bernhard in 2010. The idea is that each pod compresses on heel strike and locks rigid on toe off, which in theory gives you soft landings and firm push-offs. It's a clever idea. The execution is rubber. Specifically, it's a thermoplastic polyurethane compound called PBAX on the higher-end models, and on this one, the CloudMonster 2, it's a cheaper blend, roughly $2.40 of material per shoe, based on industrial-grade TPU pricing out of the Taiwanese suppliers that feed this category. $2.40 for the single most marketed feature on a $260 shoe. Now watch what happens when I cut through one of these pods. The wall is about 2 millimeters thick. The interior is hollow, as advertised. And here's the first thing that matters. The pod collapses inward under compression, which means the energy return profile depends entirely on the geometry of that collapse. If the wall is too thin, the pod crushes and doesn't rebound. If it's too thick, it doesn't compress at all, and you're running on a brick. On's actual engineering moat is not the pod. The pod is a shape anyone can copy, and Nike, Adidas, and about 40 Chinese brands already have. The moat is the tooling. The injection molds for these pods cost somewhere between $80,000 and $120,000 each, and On has refined their mold geometry over 15 years and 14 generations of this shoe. That's the real barrier, not the idea. The idea is free, the tooling is not. Cut through the midsole and you get to the part On mentions less, running down the length of the shoe. Embedded between the clouds and the upper is a piece of thermoplastic about the thickness of a credit card. They call it the Speedboard. It's nylon. On the flagship Cloudboom, it's carbon fiber. On the CloudMonster, it's glass-filled nylon, which costs the factory roughly $1.10 per shoe. Its job is to take the independent compression of all those pods and turn it into a coherent forward motion. Without the Speedboard, the cloud pods would just collapse independently and you'd be running on marshmallows. The Speedboard is what makes the shoe feel fast. It's also what 99% of reviewers get wrong. They credit the clouds for the ride, when the actual mechanical protagonist is a $1 piece of filled nylon. Here's the second reframe, and it's the one that changes how you should look at this entire category. The shoe industry's dirty secret is that the top of the stack, Nike, Adidas, Hoka, On, Brooks, Asics, is manufactured by a handful of Taiwanese contract manufacturers. Feng Tay makes most of it. Po Chin makes most of the rest. These are the TSMCs of footwear. Feng Tay runs factories across Vietnam, Indonesia, and India, and in any given factory you can walk down the line and see Nike Pegasus on one conveyor and On Cloudmonsters on the next, using the same glue, the same stitching machines, the same labor, often the same foam suppliers. The bill of materials on a $260 On and $140 Brooks is within $10 of each other. I've seen the teardowns. $10. So what are you actually paying the premium for? Three things, and they're worth naming honestly because this is where the engineering conversation becomes an economic one. You're paying for amortized R&D. On spends roughly 6% of revenue on product development, which works out to around $15 per shoe. You're paying for brand, marketing, and endorsements absorb another $20 to $25. And you're paying for channel, retailer margins, returns, warehousing, roughly $35 to $40. Add those to the $85 landed cost, and you're at around $160. The remaining $100 is gross margin that On keeps, and it shows up in that 59% number on their earnings call. The question worth asking then is not whether the shoe is overpriced. Every premium shoe is overpriced against its bill of materials. The question is whether On's pricing is defensible. And here's where I'll give them credit. The Hoka Teardown didn't give Hoka. On has something Hoka doesn't. The CloudTec pod geometry is genuinely differentiated, it's patented, and when you wear it, the ride is unmistakable. You can feel the Speedboard engage, you can feel the pods lock. It's not a placebo. Hoka's maximalist foam stack is essentially a shape anyone can extrude. On's is a shape that took 15 years of mold refinement. That's real engineering value, even if the material cost is $2.40. But, and this is where the honest accounting matters, that engineering value does not scale with price. The difference in manufactured costs between a $140 Brooks Ghost and a $260 On Cloudmonster is about $8. The difference in what it does for your feet, for most runners, is marginal. The premium exists because On has convinced a specific demographic, urban, design literate, willing to wear athletic shoes with jeans, that the shoe is a Swiss object. It is not a Swiss object. It is a Vietnamese object with a Swiss logo and a very good mold library. And if you understand that, you can decide for yourself whether the premium is worth it, which is a better position to be in than not understanding it at all. There's one last thing worth cutting into, and it's the part of the shoe most teardowns ignore. The upper. This one is a recycled polyester knit. On markets it as sustainable, and it is, sort of. Recycled PET from bottles knitted on a stole machine in Germany or Taiwan, roughly $3 of yarn per shoe. The interesting part is what's underneath, a heat-fused TPU cage that gives the shoe its structure. That cage is the reason the shoe holds its shape for 800 kilometers. It's also the reason the shoe cannot be recycled at end of life, because the TPU is bonded chemically to the polyester, and there's no economical way to separate them. On launched a subscription program called Cyclon to address this. You rent the shoe, send it back, they grind it down, and it is, to their credit, a real attempt at a circular product. It's also a tiny fraction of their business, because the unit economics of grinding and re-extruding are brutal, and because most customers don't want to rent their shoes. So here's where we land. The Cloudmonster is a $260 shoe with roughly $85 of cost in it. Built in Vietnam, designed in Zurich, sold on a Swiss engineering story that is half true. The pod geometry is real engineering. The Speedboard is the unsung hero. The brand premium is $100 of pure margin that exists because On figured out something the rest of the industry didn't, that runners will pay designer prices for athletic shoes if the design is good enough to wear off the track. That's not a scam exactly. It's a successful product. But it is worth knowing, the next time you're standing in a store looking at a wall of $200 shoes, that the difference between the cheap ones and the expensive ones is almost never the difference between the cheap ones and the expensive ones. It's the difference between the cheap story and the expensive story. The shoes, by the time they hit the box, are mostly the same shoe.